Okay, so it seems like there's been a little bit of a situation going on with two VTubers, which you guys might know, being MissLala and also Rev. Now, this has been a pretty interesting one. This has been blowing up over on Twitter over the past couple of hours, especially as a lot more VTubers are starting to come out and say stuff like this, which again, I might make a separate video about another one about Camilla also doing a similar thing and also facing a lot of backlash. And yeah, it seems like MissLala is facing a lot of backlash over a tweet that she made recently about the current situation with ICE. Now, this isn't the first ICE-related incident we've had in the VTubing community, or at least with a VTuber, right? With chachayourvmom obviously getting absolutely it was crazy how much hate she got over the joke that she made about ICE, and which I think is totally fine. I think you're allowed to make jokes about it, and obviously if you don't find it funny, that's fair enough, but I think that, she should be cancelled or whatever over the joke. And yeah, but this creator MissLala actually put on Twitter, screw ICE, which obviously I'm not going to say the full thing, I don't want to get demonetized, but yeah, it seems like that's the whole message, and that's what a lot of people have been putting out at the moment. Now, obviously, if you guys couldn't tell, I don't live in the US, so I'm not really gonna kind of comment exactly on the whole ICE thing, because again, I'm not there. I don't really exactly know fully how bad things are, how good things are, whatever. So again, that is just what they said, and there's been a lot of people obviously agreeing with her, but I think a lot of the people agreeing with her are obviously agreeing with her because the replies are hidden. The replies are, you can only reply if you have been mentioned, or I think these are people who actually kind of commented before she ended up locking the replies. So yeah, people are unable to respond, but with the thing about locking replies is people can still respond through quotes, and lots of people have been commenting on this as well, essentially pointing out a really big fact, because if you don't know, MissLala is a 1950s VTuber, so she has like a 1950s kind of style, especially with the VTuber model and everything like that, which I think is really cool and unique, right? I think that is definitely something that hasn't really been tapped into. So again, I think that's pretty decent, but again, lots of people have been pointing stuff out, saying 1950s her, the era that supported American soldiers, encouraged the nuclear family, heterosexuality was praised and not shamed. Am I missing something? You're literally the opposite of the 1950s era. Makes sense. You're so fake. And yeah, like, okay, I can understand it, right? Because the 1950s was a completely different time in terms of their kind of ideals and stuff. But I think that what MissLala is trying to do is obviously just take the style of the 1950s rather than the kind of culture of the 1950s, which might obviously include some of the stuff that they mentioned there, right? But I do think it is pretty funny, just as a joke, to kind of bring that up, I guess, because she's supposed to be a 1950s VTuber, and she's not really, supporting any of the things that people in the 1950s did support. But again, as I said, it is like kind of like a role play kind of, I guess, thing that is going on, right? And yeah, people saying I see. And then we get on to the actual main tweet and stuff that has actually been kind of trending, which is, yeah, Rev saying LARPs was a 1950s VTuber, hates the current federal agency that is more tame than any law enforcement agency of the time included in her LARP, and says, he says, Locks replies all you want. I think you are fully aware of your hypocrisy and baseless virtue signaling. And then she actually comes out with a response, ratioing him pretty hard there, saying, if you want to have a conversation about my actions, then come to me and let's have a conversation. My post wasn't directed towards you, and I don't know what I would have personally done to you to warrant a targeted reaction about me to your community members, to the point that I'm receiving slurs from your community members. Ephesians, I think they say Ephesians. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. You're a man of faith, correct? You don't have to like my opinions, Rav, but you also don't have to antagonize your community against me. Now, again, I think that obviously with some people over on Twitter, right, communities are very strong, and they will obviously get on a person whenever their favorite creator does so. I don't know if necessarily Rev is doing that or not, because obviously what's Rev supposed to do? Like, not tweet about it or whatever, if they want to share their opinion, regardless of what you think about that opinion, of course. But again, I feel like, he should be able to share his opinion and not be said that, oh, your whole community, you're sending your whole community towards me, which I guess you are kind of doing, in a sense, but also, what else is he supposed to do? Like, you know, I think it is a little bit odd. But yeah, I think that it's just one of these situations where I think it's pretty stupid. I think all of it's pretty stupid. And again, obviously this whole ICE thing has definitely escalated a lot of people, not just in the kind of, regular social media space, but also within VTubing too. As I said, there's been other situations of similar things happening, which of course, has kind of turned the temperature up a little bit in terms of online discussions and stuff like that. Also, it seems like Rev did actually respond with another quote retweet, which I kind of missed out, so I just put this in the video here. They're saying, your conversation was saying screw ICE, and now you're trying to weaponize my faith against me poorly. And obviously then he brings up a quote saying Romans 13:1-7, they say, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. They say, you made a public post and people disagreed with you. You tell people to have a conversation, but you immediately lock your replies when faced with criticism. Pointing out hypocrisy isn't unkind. I'm not antagonizing my community against you. If you want to play that game, just look at the replies from your own supporters towards me. You made an obnoxious virtue signaling post with no depth whatsoever. You got backlash. If you don't like that, then maybe don't dive into these topics publicly, which again, I think that's fair enough. If you can't handle people criticizing you, if you can't handle people obviously making rebuttals or whatever, then yeah, maybe you shouldn't really be posting it in a public space. But again, obviously, some people can argue whether who's right and who's wrong in this situation, right? But I do think that is definitely a big point, right? If you can't handle the heat, then get out of the kitchen, right? So yeah, obviously that has been a big conversation for a lot of people. And some people did follow up with other kind of things saying, when a foreigner resides among in your land, do not mistreat them, which obviously, now people are providing other rebuttals to that one, and it becomes this big whole thing where essentially, it's been a thing for ages, right, in terms of Bible contradictions and things. So I don't think exactly bringing out the Bible quotes is the best way to judge things, right? But obviously it is something that obviously he wanted to follow up with, seeing as, she went after his kind of faith and stuff like that, which I do think, yeah, is pretty interesting. And of course, right, I think that it is one of these things where I think that obviously, I think that he wasn't exactly trying to antagonize his community against her, but I think this is just one of these things that happens, right? Whenever it turns into a whole big Twitter drama, everybody gets involved, everybody talks about it. And I think even without Rev actually kind of posting anything about this, she still would have gotten the same backlash, or maybe not to the same extent, but I still think she would have gotten a lot of backlash from this situation, like we have seen with other people like Camilla, which Rev hasn't commented on, but she is getting backlash as well. So again, I think it is just one of those things that, if you say it publicly, you do have to expect that there are going to be some people who are not going to be super happy for whatever reason. Obviously, you can agree with that, you can disagree with that, I don't care. But again, it is just one of those things. So yeah, just thought I'd add that in there. And you got like Celestia Mir saying Sigh. Also as well, people say, funny you decide to quote the scripture. I doubt you or any of your followers are actually religious. Rev is calling you out on your bullshit is perfectly fine. Now see, they put out this image saying, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their faults, which is from Jesus of Matthew. Now obviously that is a kind of misquote, just to kind of point out there, because they do mention at the end in private. The full line is like in private at the end, right? So again, they're telling them to go and essentially, point out their faults, but in private. But they obviously missed that one out in this image, which, I think is a little bit odd. But, I don't know. Some people are obviously trying to, find other kind of, I guess, rebuttals or whatever to their point in any way they can. They say Rev didn't tell his own fans or community to respond to you. That's their own individual's decision, which, I do think is true. I think the whole like, oh, you're sending your community to me thing, I think it's pretty stupid. Not just like within this situation, just anything, right? If someone makes a tweet about someone that is just literally, talking about them, I don't think they're necessarily sending their community over. Yeah, sure, some people might have the ulterior motive to do that, and they might have the kind of I guess like the whole reason they did it was to do that, but usually they would make it very clear in the tweet, right? And I think that, if we just say this for anybody making a comment on someone and it gets popular and their fans also agree with it, I mean, you know, I think it just gets stupid to that point, right? I think that, you know, everybody's going to be sending their communities to people at that point if that is the thing that is constantly going on, right? And yeah, obviously, Rev, there's a lot of replies to Rev as well saying the problem is when you fake it to see, sorry, the problem when you fake it to make money instead of being honest, everyone sees who you really are when the mask slips, which, yeah, obviously, if you say super cool community, she's got in the replies there. And yeah, obviously, you've got the original tweet as well. People saying, you know, I remember this VTuber from being on Caroline Kwan and Will Neff's next big streamer game show. It was sponsored by Progressive, the insurance company, and had literally no engagement on any social media. Very weird show, which again, I mean, yeah, it's a weird show. I mean, that's about it though, I guess. But they say, this take ain't it, Chief. This is coming from Bonnie Brushstroke. Obviously not liking that one as much. We also got a Rundle here saying, this is a pretty dumb take. What happened to fiction isn't an endorsement of IRL actions. Acting and roleplay isn't real, homie. Which, you know, I can also understand as another point as well. You know, obviously, a lot of people in the kind of VTubing space obviously push the kind of thing of like, hey, you know, this is fiction. This isn't something that is done IRL, you know, especially in regards to stuff like lollies and things. But obviously, whenever it comes to a 1950s VTuber, it's different, which I do think is a little bit odd. But again, obviously, I don't know. It's just one of these very, very interesting situations. Obviously, people say also humans dying is real, which again, I guess, but yeah, they say, yeah, it doesn't match the time period. Said, have you ever seen a skinny chick do victory curls? I said, I've noticed a lot of e-girls doing a full-on ice hate train in the last few days. Lol, their follower accounts are about to crash. Who said, sees post unavailable, wonders what was said. Well, that's a hell of a way to find out that I blocked. Said she's not following the 50s role very to heart. It was just not diners and rock and roll during the late 50s, Lala. Which, yeah, I can definitely understand, right? Because, you know, if you're a 1950s VTuber, obviously I'm not saying that you have to follow everything, but I mean, it feels like a lot of the things that were very prevalent in the 1950s are not being followed. Maybe if, again, maybe it's just down to description. Maybe it is the fact that she's a 1950s styled VTuber rather than a 1950s VTuber. Because I think there's a big difference between a 1950s styled VTuber and a 1950s VTuber. But maybe that's just me nitpicking too much into the actual name, right? I feel like, you know, if you're a 1950s styled VTuber, then it'll make a lot more sense because you're just taking the style from it. But they obviously call themselves a 1950s VTuber, which, yeah, obviously comes with a lot of the kind of culture and a lot of everything that was going on at that time, including people's opinions on law enforcement and people's opinions on other things as well, which, you know, but I mean, you know, they decided to call themselves a 1950s VTuber, right? It's not like anybody else's fault. But again, obviously, it just seems to be one of those situations which is just kind of, you know, evolving at the moment. And I do think it is a very, very odd one. Again, as I said, I'm in the UK, so all of this ICE stuff, I don't really think I have much of a position to say much. Obviously, some of the things I've seen is horrible, but again, you know, I can't really say too much because, again, I don't think I'm really in the position to say anything about something that's not even going on in my own country, right? And obviously, if it did happen over here, then maybe I'll be a little bit more vocal and talking about it. But at the end of the day, it's not really a thing that I've really delved into too much. And as I said, I'm not there, so I don't really know what is going on in terms of how bad it is and how much this is happening to a lot of people or how little is happening to a lot of people, you know, on the contrary, right? So yeah, I think it is a pretty interesting one overall. But as I said, it does seem like there is a big spike of some VTubers obviously calling out ICE or whatever. And yeah, obviously a lot of people are not happy with that, including Rev, who obviously calls out the kind of hypocrisy of a 1950s VTuber, which I do think he is right about the kind of the hypocrisy of the 1950s VTuber thing. It's just like, you know, I think more of this conversation is surrounding how he went about it rather than the actual conversation itself, which I do think is pretty interesting because, again, they didn't actually, you know, mention anything to do with the fact, you know, saying, oh, well, I actually only follow this, or, oh, well, this is why I'm a 1950s VTuber or whatever. They don't even talk about that, right? They just talk about the fact of, like, if you want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation. You know, my post wasn't directed towards you. And again, essentially just defending, you know, themselves in terms of, like, being replied to, which, again, I feel like, you know, if you wanted to make a response, maybe, you know, respond in a way that, you know, explains why you're a 1950s VTuber and the kind of things that you take from that. and whatever. But hey, you know, that just seems to be the situation that's going on. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update, as it has been going pretty insane lately. And as well, you know, a lot of you guys have been asking in the comments for me to cover this. So again, obviously I don't want to, you know, take too heavily to one side here, because as I said, I don't know, you know, I'm pretty misinformed when, well, no, I'm not misinformed, but I'm pretty, you know, far from it in terms of everything that is going on with ICE and everything like that. So I didn't really want to, you know, be too politically heavy on either side at the moment, right? Because again, it's not really my place, and obviously I'll let the Americans do that. But obviously I hope this gives you a little bit of a rundown of what has gone on, what some people are saying, and why this whole controversy is going on at the moment. But yeah, that's essentially all I got for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, go to GameStop, use my code Kazza, get 10% off. Again, they've got a ton of really cool stuff over there. Definitely recommend checking it out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. That's all. Yeah.